Okay, so picture this. It's 2031. There's a massive heat wave. Half the grid is maxed out, and everyone's bracing for rolling blackouts. And nothing happens. Why? Because a parking garage full of Teslas just quietly powered the entire block. No, I'm not making that up. That's not science fiction. That's a real technology that already exists, right now, and it's sitting in driveways all over the world. Here's the crazy part, though. The guy who invented it did it in the 1990s, in a lab most people have never heard of, and for 30 years nobody wanted it. So what changed? And why does the biggest blackout disaster in American history, the one that killed hundreds of people, have everything to do with the phone? I mean the car, in your garage. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you're going to look at your own car battery like it's a tiny power plant. Because, well, it kind of is. Alright, so let's rewind for a second, because to get why this matters, you gotta understand something wild about how your electricity actually works. Like, right now, today. For basically 150 years, the power grid has run on one rule, and it's a dumb rule when you think about it. Electricity gets made in one place, a power plant, and it flows one direction, to you. You're a consumer. Full stop. You don't send electricity back. You just take it, use it, pay the bill. Done. This whole system kicked off in 1882 when Thomas Edison flipped the switch on Pearl Street Station in Lower Manhattan. This was like the first commercial power grid in America, powering a few hundred light bulbs in the financial district. And here's a fun bit of history that actually gets messed up a lot online. Edison's system ran on direct current, DC, which is great for short distances but terrible for sending power far. So this Serbian engineer named Nikola Tesla, working with businessman George Westinghouse, pushed alternating current, AC, which could travel way further with way less power loss. This turned into this legendary rivalry, the War of Currents. It basically got settled when AC power lit up the 1893 World's Fair and then powered Niagara Falls' massive hydroelectric plant a few years later in the 1890s. AC won. That's still the system we use today. One direction, plant to plug. For over 100 years, nobody questioned it. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because in the 1990s, a professor at the University of Delaware named Willett Kempton looked at this one-way system and basically went, wait, why does it have to be one way? His idea, and I promise this sounds way simpler than it is, if an electric car has a battery, and that battery is just sitting there charged up in a garage for like 22 hours a day doing nothing, why can't the car sell some of that power back to the grid when the grid needs it? Like, imagine your car as a tiny power plant on wheels that also happens to drive you to Target. That's it. That's the whole idea. They called it vehicle to grid, or V2G. For decades, though, this was basically a cool science project nobody could actually use. The batteries were too small, EVs were rare, and the tech to safely push power backward through a car charger barely existed. But Kempton's team kept at it, and then, in 2013, this is the part that's actually a huge deal historically. University of Delaware EVs became one of the first systems in the world to earn real money, actual dollars, from a grid operator called PJM, just for plugging in and helping stabilize the grid's frequency. Not from driving, from doing nothing but sitting there, plugged in, ready to help. That's the moment this stopped being science fiction. Real quick, drop a comment below. Did you know your EV, or even just your house battery, could technically get paid to help the power grid? Because I sure didn't, until I started digging into this. So here's the thing that made this whole idea go from cool experiment to we might actually need this. And it's a genuinely tragic story, so bear with me. February 2021, Texas. A brutal winter storm, Winter Storm Uri, rolls through, and temperatures crash to levels the state's power system was never built for. Natural gas wells freeze. Power plants trip offline, one after another, And the Texas grid operator, ERCOT, realizes they are about 4 minutes away from a total catastrophic grid collapse, the kind that could have taken weeks to fix, not days. So they do the only thing they can. They order rolling blackouts, not small ones, about 20,000 megawatts worth, which was, at the time, the largest manually controlled blackout event in U.S. history. Over 4.5 million homes lost power, some for 4 straight days in freezing temperatures. And the human cost was devastating. The official death toll sits at 246 people, though some independent researchers estimate it could be as high as 700 when you count storm-related deaths that weren't officially classified that way. People froze in their own homes. I want to pause here because this is the pattern interrupt moment. The tone shifts here on purpose. This isn't just a wow, crazy stat story. Real families lost people because a grid built on a 100-year-old one-directional design had zero backup plan. And that's exactly the gap that this everything to grid shift is trying to close. Because here's the thing. In a world where millions of EVs and smart buildings can push power back into the grid during an emergency, that 4 minutes from collapse moment looks very different. Instead of one giant, fragile, centralized system, you get this distributed web of tiny backup power sources, cars, batteries, buildings, all standing by. Researchers at places like the National Renewable Energy Laboratory have been modeling exactly this: how buildings alone spend 20 to 40% of their electricity costs just handling short, sharp demand spikes, and how EV batteries plugged into a building could smooth that out locally, without even needing to touch the main utility grid. Okay, so how does this actually work? In plain English, no jargon. Basically 3 layers. Layer 1, vehicle to home, or V2H. Your EV's battery becomes a giant backup generator for your house during an outage. Ford actually markets this directly with the F-150 Lightning, and Nissan's Leaf has supported this kind of two-way charging for years. Layer 2, vehicle to building, or V2B. This is the office parking garage scenario. Instead of one car powering one house, a fleet of parked EVs, think delivery vans, employee cars, whatever's plugged in, collectively shave the building's peak demand, which is often the single biggest chunk of a commercial electric bill. Layer 3, vehicle to grid, full V2G. This is the big one, where cars and buildings sell power back into the actual wholesale electricity market, the same market power plants sell into. And this is where the legal and political story gets wild, because until very recently, the rules of that market basically didn't allow small, distributed stuff like this to even participate. That changed with something called FERC Order 2222. This is a real, binding federal regulation issued in 2020 by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. In plain terms, it forces grid operators across the country to let aggregated distributed energy resources, batteries, EVs, smart thermostats, rooftop solar, all bundled together, bid into the same energy markets that massive coal and gas plants have dominated for a century. Full implementation for energy and ancillary services markets is set for November 2026, which, by the way, is basically right now as you're watching this. This is genuinely one of the biggest, quietest regulatory shifts in modern U.S. energy policy, and almost nobody outside the industry has heard of it. So let's speed through the Why This Matters list, because there's a lot packed in here. 1. It makes the grid dramatically more resilient against exactly the kind of collapse Texas nearly suffered. 2. It can lower everyone's electricity bills because utilities won't need to build as many expensive peaker plants that only run a few hours a year. 3. It turns millions of ordinary people into tiny energy entrepreneurs, literally getting paid for a resource, parked car batteries, that used to just sit there depreciating. Now, before this sounds like a perfect fairy tale, let's talk about the real tension, because there's a legitimate debate happening. Every time your battery cycles, charges and discharges, it degrades a tiny bit. So there's an actual scientific and engineering question researchers are still studying. Does the money you earn from V2G outweigh the extra wear on an expensive EV battery? The honest answer right now is, it depends on the battery chemistry, how it's managed, and how often you're cycling it. And this is still an active area of research, not a fully settled question. There's also a control question worth sitting with. If your car and your building both become tiny nodes in the power grid, who's actually in charge of that decision at 6 p.m. on a hot Tuesday? You or the utility company? Right now, most pilot programs let you opt in and set limits. But as this scales up nationally through 2026 and beyond, that's a genuinely open question being fought over in regulatory hearings as we speak. So here's where we land. That opening scene, the heat wave, the blackout that never happened because of parked EVs. That's not a fantasy. It's the literal design goal of a regulatory and technological shift that started in a University of Delaware lab in the 1990s, got its first real proof of concept in 2013, and is being forced into national policy through 2026. The Texas disaster in 2021 wasn't caused by a lack of this technology, but it's exactly the kind of catastrophe this technology is built to prevent going forward. Here's the thing that should stick with you, though. This shift means the boundary between the grid and your stuff is dissolving. Your car isn't just a car anymore. Your building isn't just a building. They're becoming part of the actual infrastructure that keeps the lights on for everyone else, too. And that raises a question I genuinely don't think has a clean answer yet. When your private property becomes public infrastructure, who does it actually belong to? That's the video I think we need to make next. So if you want to see us dig into the ownership battle over your own battery, you know what to do.